How did Lincoln view his speech? This could have been one of the greatest speeches. It was one of the greatest speeches ever uttered by a president or others. How many times do we see a monument to a speech? We don't.
Okay, our guest today, his name is Brad Gottfried. You would see him all over the place. He's here today to talk to us. Lincoln Comes to Gettysburg, and the mysteries and questions, and burning ideas that we may or may not have about that. He's here to tell us all about it and give us an inside look at that. He's a certified battlefield guide in Antietam. He's also a licensed town guide in Gettysburg. He's a retired educator and administrator, and he was even a president of 2 colleges. He has 19 published books, and you might recognize him because he shows up on podcasts. I've seen him on a podcast called Addressing Gettysburg a couple times. Always a great guest, and I was pretty excited to see him come and join us here today. If there's a roundtable that wants somebody to come in and get into the details of something, historical societies, they go to Brad Gottfried. So it is a great pleasure to introduce you. And is there anything that you wanted to say that I maybe missed to set up the program you have today for us?
The only thing is I'm up to 21 books at this point. They just keep rolling out.
Are you?
Yeah.
Very good. All right. That's awesome.
Okay, very good. All right. Now, this may go a little bit longer than typical. So I'm not going to be upset if people decide that they need to get off, but there's a lot to tell you about. And this presentation is actually comes from a book that I did with my wife, Linda. I've done 4 books with her, and we're still married, so that's a good thing. I'm a town guide, as you heard, and part of what we do is Lincoln's visit to Gettysburg. And I wanted to learn more about Lincoln. And so my philosophy has always been, if I'm going to spend the time studying and learning, I might as well share with others. This book really is a 2-parter. One is the actual creation, as you can see at the bottom, of the National Cemetery. And the second part is Lincoln's visit and the dedication. That's what we're going to talk about tonight or today. Part 1 we can talk about in the future if you're interested. We like to talk about that first part as the Second Battle of Gettysburg. I always like to, now it's hard with Zoom. As an educator, I always like to ask people. I like audience participation, but I don't think I'm going to get it today, but it's just fine. You know, everybody knows about Arlington. A lot of people know about Gettysburg, but I always ask, how many national cemeteries are there in the United States? And I always get, maybe half a dozen, maybe 4 or 5. There are 164 national cemeteries in the United States, which really is a surprise. It surprised me when I learned that figure. Why a national cemetery? Well, it's pretty obvious. There were almost 8,000 men lying in a hot July sun. They had to be buried, and they had to be buried quickly. So they're going to be creating these long trenches, maybe 2 feet deep, if that, with just enough soil to cover the bodies. So if there was a big rainfall or a hungry pig, you would have body parts exposed. The 2 individuals that played a major role are David Wills on the right and Andrew Curtin on the left. And David Wills was what you would call an agent. And I didn't know much about agents until I wrote the book with my wife. Every state, 18 states that lost young men in this battle, appointed an agent that would come to Gettysburg and would assist people from their state in identifying what happened to their loved one who had fought during the battle. Was he wounded? Where was he? Was he okay? Did he die, etc.? And David Wills was the agent for Pennsylvania. Now they're going to get together and come up with the idea for the National Cemetery. And again, I'm not going to go through all of that, but we're going to talk about the dedication today and Lincoln's visit. We're going to immediately start off with a question, and that is, why so late? Why November 19th, 1863? Well, the bodies were being moved as of the end of September, which is kind of surprising that it would move so quickly. Battle, the beginning of July, moving the bodies the end of September. That meant, financing first. You had to buy the land, you had to design the cemetery, etc. And then they're going to get involved in actually dedicating it. Well, they want to get this guy, Edward Everett. Now, everybody, well, if you're interested in the Civil War, you've heard of Edward Everett. And back during the time of the Civil War, everybody knew Edward Everett. Today, if you ask someone on the street, they'll probably say, who? Edward Everett was the world-renowned orator. Whenever you had a major function, you brought in an orator. And they decided to go big. They wanted this to be the event of the century, this dedication, and they're hoping that thousands and thousands of people will attend. And one way to get all these people is to have someone like Edward Everett. This guy was the governor of Massachusetts. He was senator from Massachusetts, congressman. He was president of Harvard University. He was ambassador to England. I mean, he did a lot of different things, and he's a wonderful orator. The problem is, when they wanted to do it, which was on September 23rd, excuse me, I'm going to take that back. They're going to ask him on September 23rd. They would like to do it in October. Now, when you think about Philadelphia, and by the way, I'm from Philadelphia, they initially thought if they did it in October, mid-October, the weather's going to be seasonable, it's going to be nice. And the problem was Edward Everett says, I'd love to do it, but I can't do it in October, but I can do it in November, toward the end of November. And the committee had to determine what was more important, bringing a lesser-known speaker in, but bringing him earlier, when the weather's still going to be nice, or cross your fingers and in October and in November, hope it's not going to be freezing cold like it is today. I live near Gettysburg. We had some snow flurries. Hopefully that won't happen. And fortunately, they did luck out. So if you wonder why November 19th, it's all about Edward Everett. Now, the problem when they designed this program, the dedication program, is that there had never been a national cemetery that had been dedicated. There were a few that were in existence, Ball's Bluff, etc., but they had never been dedicated. This was going to be the first national cemetery dedicated, and they had no models. So they decided to look at private cemeteries, municipal cemeteries, other cemeteries that had been dedicated, and they wanted to know, well, what are some of the components? Well, one is the orator. That's taken care of with Edward Everett. You need music. And they're going to bring in, as you can see, the Marine Band. Why the Marine Band? There are lots of different bands in the different service organizations. They decided they wanted the Marine Band because it's the favorite of the big guy being Abraham Lincoln. And in the back of their mind, they knew it was a pipe dream, but wouldn't it be nice if Abraham Lincoln could come to Gettysburg and participate in the dedication of the National Cemetery? So we'll invite his band, his favorite band, to come. And that's why they invited the Marine Band, which will accept the invitation. On the left is Adolph Birchfield. He had a band out of Philadelphia, believe it or not. I don't know how many of you heard of it. I had never heard of him. But he was Governor Curtin's favorite band. And I should mention, Governor Curtin, Andrew Curtin, was a wonderful, wonderful governor. Immediately embraced the idea of a national cemetery and actually uses state funds to buy all the land. When you walk around the National Cemetery at Gettysburg, know that it was not paid for, any of it, by the federal government. The land was paid for by the state, and all of the other 18 states chipped in and paid for everything else. Okay, you got music, you've got the orator. You also need prayers. Reverend T.H. Stockton is going to give the invocation. Most people have never heard of him. I certainly didn't. But you did know about him if you lived in 1863. He was the chaplain of the U.S. House of Representatives. Everybody knows him. So he is going to be tapped to do the invocation. Over on the right is Henry Bulger, who you may or may not have heard of. He was the president of Pennsylvania College, now called Gettysburg College. The civilians, the citizens of Gettysburg had suffered so severely during the battle, during the campaign, that they wanted to recognize their efforts by bringing a local person in and having him be part of the ceremony. So he's going to do the benediction. Okay, so you got the various components. You've got the oration, you got the music, you got the prayers. The problem is somebody needs to do the minute planning, and they just didn't have the time to do this. And so as it's getting closer to the dedication, we're talking again about the 19th, they decide to bring in this man. His name's Ward. It's actually pronounced Lemon. Now, he's a good friend of Abraham Lincoln. Governor Curtin also knows him very well, and they will tap him to actually do the dotting the I's, so to speak, of the dedication ceremony. There's another reason why there's a couple of reasons why they want him. One, he's very meticulous. Two, he's an attorney. And maybe equally importantly, he is one of Lincoln's best friends. Before Lincoln becomes president, he will ride the circuit, the legal circuit in Illinois with Abraham Lincoln, oftentimes sleeping in the same bed with him. They were very, very close friends in a positive way. I don't want to sound sordid there. And when Lincoln becomes president, he will invite Lemon to come to Washington to be the U.S. Marshal of Washington. And actually, he's essentially the chief bodyguard for Lincoln. He's, for most cases, when he's giving a speech, etc., he's going to be pretty close by, protecting him. And the thinking is, wouldn't it be nice if he could encourage President Lincoln to attend? They don't think it's going to happen, but it's not going to hurt. On November the 2nd, David Wills will send 2 letters to Abraham Lincoln. And these are both in the Library of Congress. The one on the left essentially invites him to, is telling him we're going to have this ceremony, and wouldn't it be great if you could come? And on the right is the town's going to be busy. If you do come, you can spend the night in my house. But again, nobody's really expecting that he's going to be coming. Another question is, why was the speech so short? Well, I think I can tell you that. So he's going to Wills will invite, you saw the letter, on November the 2nd. And the committee will get, now the committee is composed of the organizing committee of every agent from those 18 states. They are totally shocked and surprised when Lincoln sends them a message to say, yeah, I think I might want to come to Gettysburg and participate in the dedication ceremony. Nobody expected that. Well, all hell breaks loose when Commissioner Clark Carr, who is from Illinois and a good friend of Lincoln, says, let him talk. We ought to create a section of the program just for Lincoln. And that sparks quite a controversy. As I mentioned, all hell breaks loose at that point, because there were some members of the committee of all these agents who basically said, The ceremony is too long as it is. Adding another speaker, such as the president, it'll be just outrageously long. No, he shouldn't speak at all. He should sit in the front and look presidential, but should not speak. There were some other folks there, especially people from the agent from New York, that piped up, well, Lincoln has never done this kind of thing before. He's not going to know what to say. And remember, Lincoln liked to tell stories. He liked to crack jokes. He said, imagine if he gets up on that stage and starts telling inappropriate jokes or stories. No, he shouldn't speak. Well, many, as I mentioned, many of these were Democrats who don't want to give Lincoln, who's a Republican, a leg up during his reelection campaign, which will kick off in the near future. So yes, he can come, but he shouldn't speak. The Republicans on the committee said, let him speak as long as he wishes. He's the president, for goodness sakes. And what happens is a compromise occurs where they will agree that he can speak, but he can only say a few appropriate remarks. Now, I want you to imagine you're President Lincoln, and you're going to schlep all the way to Gettysburg. You're the president who's been duly elected by the people, being told by this group of individuals who have no power, no responsibility, of nobody elected them, telling him that you shouldn't speak very long. I think I'd be offended, and I think I would say, I'm going to speak as long as I want. But Lincoln decides that he is going to respect their wishes of a few appropriate remarks, and that's why the speech is so short, why it's under 300 words. And I truly believe if he was not given that instruction, and if it was longer, I don't think it would be nearly as powerful as it turned out to be. And you can see on November 14th is when David Wills will write back to Lincoln about, yes, we'd love for you to come, and we'd like for you to say a few appropriate remarks. So if anybody asks you, now you know. Okay, when does Lincoln decide that he's coming? Well, we don't know. That's a question mark. We know that Andrew Curtin has a close relationship with Lincoln. He will go periodically to Washington to visit with him. You need to understand that this man is very important to Lincoln because Pennsylvania is the largest Republican state in the Union. Remember, Horatio Seymour, governor of New York, is a Democrat and was just elected governor. So New York is now Democratic state, Democrat. And so the thinking is, and we don't know this for certain, that when Andrew Curtin did go to Washington to meet with the president, there are a number of items on the agenda, but one was indeed, I really would like you to come and participate in the dedication. And can Lincoln really antagonize this man? So he really is even thinking more about it. We think, we're not certain, that he may have decided as early as the 15th, the following day, but there's going to be some issues. And one of the issues is that it is very, very difficult, as we're going to see, for a president to leave Washington. There's no Air Force One, there's no cars. And yes, you've got trains, but they're very unreliable. He does leave occasionally during the Peninsula Campaign, during the Antietam campaign he left. Apparently, Lincoln is going to talk to his wife, Mary Todd, and say, hey, I know you're not happy with me, that I'm not spending a lot of time with the family, that my responsibilities as president are really taking up a lot of time. How about all of us go to Gettysburg? All of us meaning her, Lincoln, Abraham, and son Tad. And she says, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Why don't we do that? On the 17th, Lincoln will issue an invitation to the man on the left. His name is William Saunders, who you may not have ever heard of, but this is a man who works for the U.S. Department of Agriculture and helped to design parts of Central Park. And he is going to be tapped by the organizing committee at Gettysburg to design the National Cemetery. So when you go to the National Cemetery, it's this man on the left that actually designed it. Lincoln wants to talk to him. He wants to see the layout. He wants to talk more about the battlefield that William Saunders has visited, and probably trying to get some inspiration for his speech that he's preparing during this time. But there's a setback. And on the evening of the 17th, Tad, and I don't know if you can see my pointer here, his youngest son is going to come down with a case of smallpox. It's a mild form called variola. It can still kill him. And I always ask this, and nobody's going to be able to answer me, and that's fine. How many children did Lincoln have in his lifetime? And the answer is 4, all boys. How many were still alive in 1863? 2. He's already lost half of his children. The young man on the right is not even 3 years old. No, not even 4 years old. His name is Edward. He's Lincoln's second son. He dies in 1850. They think of tuberculosis. And then if you look over here to the other side, the left side, you see Tad, you see Robert, you see Mary, you see Lincoln, but on the wall, you see 11-year-old Willie, who died the year before of typhoid fever. So I want to ask you a question. You are president. You had 4 children, 2 of them are dead. Your baby, the one, if you've seen the movie Lincoln, you know what a close relationship he has with his baby son, Lincoln. I mean, with Tad. Would you leave his bedside to travel to Gettysburg to dedicate the National Cemetery? It's such a personal question. I don't know if I could have done it, but we know the answer. He decides that he's going to leave his side and is going to visit Gettysburg. He wants to go to Gettysburg for really 2 major reasons. First reason is to really honor the dead, to make sure that they are known, their loved ones, the country knows that they have not died in vain. And 2, people are starting to waver. Why are we losing so many of our young men? Why are there so many empty places at the home folks area, whether it's at the head of the table or a son? Maybe we should just let the South go. And he is feeling very strongly that the nation needs to remain intact, and he needs to tell the nation that. So those are 2 major reasons why he's coming and what's going to be in his speech. Now, the man on the left is, as you probably know, Edwin Stanton. I don't know if I've ever seen a photograph of him actually smiling. That's a typical pose for Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War. But the president will invite him to plan the itinerary. How is Lincoln going to get to Gettysburg? And he says to the president, he says, Mr. Lincoln, I know you're busy. I know you have a sick son. How about if I get you on the train on the morning of the 19th, the morning of the dedication? You get there in time for the dedication. You do the dedication. You get back on the train. You've only lost a day. What do you think? And Lincoln essentially says, are you nuts? Trains are notoriously unreliable. I could see, he says, me getting there. The train breaks down. I get there late. Dedication's over. I've wasted all that time. He says, if I'm going the evening before. I'm going on the evening of the 18th. It's very, very difficult to get from Washington to Gettysburg. There's 3 train lines that he has to use. One is he's going to go from Washington to Baltimore on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. He gets to Baltimore, they detach the locomotive, they drag the cars across Baltimore to a new train line. They put the cars on the train, on the tracks, add a locomotive, that's the Northern Central Railroad, and then it goes into Pennsylvania, specifically Hanover Junction, where the same thing's going to happen. Detach the locomotive, move the cars, add a new locomotive, and off they go eventually to Gettysburg. So it's a long, long process. It's not going to be easy either. One of the people on the right that he appreciates, one of his many friends, is John Garrett. John Garrett is the owner, well, I should say the president of the B&O Railroad. And he has a beautifully decked out car that's just for his use. And he says, Mr. President, I can't go with you to Gettysburg, but I'm going to lend you the use of my car. So Lincoln is going to really ride to Gettysburg in quite a high style. The man on the left may have one of the toughest jobs of all. His name is General James Fry. He's a brigadier general. He's a West Pointer. He had a distinguished career in the Mexican War. Now he's not commanding troops. He's a bureaucrat. He works in the War Department. And he is given what might seem to be a fairly easy job, and that is go over to the Executive Mansion or White House with a buggy, collect the president, and take him to the B&O Railroad Depot. Easy, right? Well, the problem is Lincoln does not want to leave. Lincoln's busy. He's signing documents. He's meeting with people. He's reading things. And James Fry is getting more and more annoyed and concerned that that train needs to leave. It's late, and it's a real problem. And he starts pacing in front of Lincoln's door, in front of his office door. Now, some would say, in fact, in the book, it says that Lincoln smiled and brought him into his office. I don't think in thinking about it, I don't think he was smiling. I think he was very annoying to the president and said to James Fry, get in here. I want to tell you a story, he says, one of his patented stories. He says, there was once a man on his way to the gallows. He's sitting in the back of a wagon, and he's sitting on his coffin, and he's heading over to the gallows where he's going to be hung. Well, all of these townspeople are running past him, using their elbows. They want to get a front row seat because back then it was high entertainment to watch someone be hung, apparently. And this convicted man yells out to these people running past, what's your hurry? They're not going to start without me. And that, I think, calmed down James Fry. That train is not going anywhere without Lincoln. Finally, he agrees to leave, gets in the buggy, and off he goes to the railroad station. Okay. Well, eventually he's going to reach Gettysburg. And you can see an artist's representation. I don't know if he's standing on a platform or if he's surrounded by midgets, but there he is. As we all know, that train station is still there. They almost tore it down in the 1920s. Fortunately, they did not. He's going to get out, and he is going to walk up Carlisle Street to the Wells House, where he's going to spend the night. Now, the dream of the organizing committee was realized. This is truly the event of the century. There are 15,000 people who have come to Gettysburg to witness this event. Some say 10,000, some say 15,000, some in between. No one will ever know. When he arrives or when he's on the train, most of the cabinet members, including Stanton, will beg off. They're too busy, they say. But he will come with three members of his cabinet. On the left, John Usher, who probably you don't know of. I don't know who he was. Department of Interior. On the right, William Seward, who becomes one of Lincoln's closest confidants, Secretary of State, and Pennsylvania's own Montgomery Blair from the Blair family of Pennsylvania. Obviously, he's going to be coming as well. So these are just some quotes. I don't know if I want to read all these quotes to you, but it is crazy. You have to understand that the population of Gettysburg in 1860 census was 2,400 people. Yeah, there's some hotels, but not nearly enough hotels, not nearly enough beds, not nearly enough even floors of people who live in Gettysburg to accommodate all of these people who have come to attend the ceremony. And so imagine thousands and thousands are just milling around all night with no place to go. When David Wills gets to the when Abraham Lincoln gets to the Wills house, he will be greeted by David on the right and his wife Catherine on the left. Catherine will be charged with being the hostess. She will be charged with preparing dinner for Lincoln that evening on the 18th. And not only Lincoln, but over 30 other people will be present. She has 3 small children, and she's pregnant with her 4th. So it's not going to be an easy time for her. He'll get up to his room, and it's a very nice room, as you can see, very spacious. Probably washes his hands and face, probably uses the commode, and it finally will go down to dinner. One of the questions was and is, was Lincoln protected? We all know what happens at Ford Theater. Well, similarly, there is going to be a guard at his door, his bedroom door. His name is Sergeant Hugh Paxton Bigham of the 21st Pennsylvania Cavalry, which is local to Gettysburg. And what's nice is he will leave a memoir. So we know a lot of what happened that evening. And he's going to be, it's fascinating because a telegram will arrive for Lincoln that evening on the 18th and takes it, knocks on the door, gives it to the president. And the president will come out a few minutes later, very relieved to tell Hugh Bigham that the telegram is from Washington, that Tad is feeling better. He's out of the woods, still very ill, but not as bad as he was. At the front door is Rush Bigham, the brother of Hugh, and so there is going to be some protection. We're not talking about a large detail, but there is going to be some protection. Now, you can imagine that Lincoln sitting in the Wills house having supper is going to be serenaded. There's lots of bands in addition to the Marine Band, the Birchfield Band, the 5th New York Artillery Band will be there. There's a quartet coming there. And all through dinner, he's going to be serenaded. But imagine, if you will, you have never met the president. You've never seen the president. You would like to hear him speak. And they will demand that the president come out and provide some remarks. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but the newspaper reporter jotted all this down. And basically, it's saying, and I can say this in one sentence, I don't have anything to tell you tonight. Thanks for coming. Come tomorrow, though, when you'll hear my speech. That's it. The reaction to that, which a lot of people were very frustrated. Lincoln was probably one of the best speechwriters ever, but impromptu, he was horrible. He said nothing, but he said it very well. I like John Hayes' remarks, his personal aide. President said a half dozen words, which you can see more than half a dozen, meaning nothing, and then he went back in. Well, people are very frustrated, and they're going to go next door where William Seward is. They're going to demand a speech from him. They're going to go to Usher, where Usher is staying. In other words, they're going to go from place to place, demanding that these dignitaries provide some impromptu remarks. And most are much better, by the way. Another question. Where does Lincoln write the Gettysburg Address? And if you were not muted, I would say, what do you think, guys and gals? And you would say, well, I heard that he wrote it on the train, right? And do you remember that, writing it on the train? Well, there was a woman. Her name was Mary Raymond Andrews, and she wrote a novelette called The Perfect Tribute. This novelette was required reading for every child in the grade schools in the 30s and 40s. The problem was she had heard the story from her brother. She assumed it was correct and she embellished it. Turns out it was totally incorrect, but everybody had that vision of where he wrote the Gettysburg Address. And do you remember? He's sitting all by himself on the train. He sees a scrap of paper. It's an envelope. He picks it up, takes off his top hat, puts it on his lap, grabs a pencil, and on the back of that envelope writes the Gettysburg Address, right? Harris, do you remember that? Well, what happened is just the opposite. If you've ever been on a Civil War era train, you know you don't write anything. It's shaking all around. You're bouncing around. That's number one. And number two, Lincoln is not sitting there all by himself. He's got all of his friends with him. They are cracking jokes. They're telling stories. He's having a good old time. There's no peace there. There's no time for him to be writing the Gettysburg Address. So where is he going to write it? Well, we know there's 2 pages of the Gettysburg Address. It's called the John Nicolay copy. It's in the Library of Congress. The first page at the top says Executive Mansion, meaning he wrote it before he left, but he never finished it. He's going to finish it after supper before he tries to get some sleep that evening at the Wills house. And the question is, well, why? Why would he have waited to the last minute to finish the Gettysburg Address? A number of hypotheses. One, maybe he ran out of time. He just didn't have enough time. Maybe he said to himself, I don't know if I'm even going. Why am I wasting all my time on a speech I'm never going to give? Maybe he said, I'm going to do half of it, and I need inspiration. I need to get to Gettysburg. I need to feel it in order for me to really craft the ending of the speech. But whatever reason, he's going to do it that evening after supper. And this is kind of interesting. David Wills will also leave a memoir, and you can read it, that Lincoln is going to summon him up to his, Wills up to his room, and he wants to know more specifically, what do you expect from me? What is the committee looking for as he's crafting his final remarks, that final page? To the right, again, is William Seward. He's going to, after he's finished, he's going to go next door and have, I guess he's going to read it to Seward to get his viewpoint of it. And then finally, he's going to try to get some sleep, although I doubt whether he's sleeping very much because of all the crowd and all the noises going on outside of his bedroom. Now, David Wills' house has lots of people. It's got lots of bedrooms. One bedroom has Abraham Lincoln. Another bedroom has Edward Everett. And why am I showing you this? Well, I'm going to explain to you. Well, I'm glad my wife isn't here because she always tells me, don't tell this story, Brad. What happens is it's probably around midnight on the night before the dedication. There's a knock on Edward Everett's door. bedroom door in the Wills house. He opens up the door and there's David Wills standing there. He says, "Excuse me, Mr. Everett, the president has just," oh, let's step back. The governor of Pennsylvania, Andrew Curtin, has just arrived. I have no place for him to sleep. Can he share your bed? Again, that was normal back then. And Edward Everett will probably very politely decline and say, "No, thank you. I hope you'll find another place for him." And that was the end of it. Now, it's very unusual for, if you're a guest and the host asks you for a favor to do something like that, you're probably going to try to grant it. Well, what I'm showing here, I'm going to tell you a hypothesis. This is showing part of the crowd during the dedication the following day. Right here is the speaker's platform. You can see how raised it is. And behind it is what you call a comfort tent. Edward Everett requested a comfort tent, probably because he was having urinary issues. So he could slip back to the back of the stage, go into the comfort tent, relieve himself, and then come back out again and sit back up on stage. Well, if indeed he has urinary issues, as it seems to be, imagine you're lying in bed with the governor next to you, and you've wet the bed, and not only do you have urine all over the bed and all over you, you also have wet the governor. No, the governor cannot stay with me, is what he said, and probably for that reason. We don't know. It's one of the mysteries. Okay. Well, the morning of the dedication now, Lincoln, before breakfast, is going to leave the Wills house, and he's going to visit the battlefield. But nobody knows exactly where he went. And it's always, I think, going to be a mystery. Now, I have a strong suspicion where he went. If you leave the Wills house, and most of you hopefully have been to the Wills house, know that it's on the square. If you go around the square, down Chambersburg Street, to the seminary, and just beyond the cemetery is Herbst Woods, where General John Reynolds was killed. There was a tree there, as you can see, and they had hammered up a sign that says, "This is where General Reynolds was killed." Lincoln knew Reynolds. He had offered him command of the Army of the Potomac. It's not far from the Wills house. I think that's where he went to get inspiration prior to giving the Gettysburg Address. We don't know. We probably never will know. He will he'll return, have breakfast, get ready for the event. Now, if you ever have a chance to go on to the website, Library of Congress website, you will see a copy of the program. On the left side is the procession, the order of the procession. On the right side is the order of the actual dedication ceremony. I want to concentrate here, though, because this is really neat, and it just jumped up. There it is. Okay. It talks about the Army will be present, the president, and we go down, you'll see judges of the Supreme Court, Edward Everett. We go down the vice president, members of the House of Congress, mayors, you can see, going down religious groups, telegraphic, hospital corps, Masonic fraternity. All of these, this is the order they're going to be lining up for the procession. You're going to have the soldiers lining up on Carlisle Street. All of these that I've mentioned are going to be on York Street. And all of us who have come to the ceremony after the fire companies are the citizens of Pennsylvania. We're going to line up, all of us, right on Chambersburg Street. Behind us will be citizens of other states, District of Columbia, and citizens of other territories. In other words, we're all marching. 15,000 of us are marching toward the National Cemetery. And we actually have a photograph. This is Baltimore Street. taken probably around where that traffic light is, around Steinway Avenue, maybe a little bit closer to downtown. But you can see, you see these? It looks like sticks. These are bayonets. These are the soldiers leading the procession. Further back will be Lincoln, and further back will be all of us. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Okay. There were marshals, a number of marshals. In fact, right, where is he? I'm not seeing him. Ward Lemon is right here. Anyway, these are not marshals from the standpoint of they have guns and like, they are just parade marshals. They're trying to keep the order, as you can see. One of the question marks is, what kind of horse did Lincoln ride? Now, when Ward Lemon designed the ceremony and designed the whole process, he said, either you, when you're in the procession, either you will walk or you will ride a horse. You will not be in a buggy or in a carriage. It's just too complicated. Well, some said, they claim that it was the smallest, that Lincoln was on the smallest horse they ever saw. That his feet literally touched the ground. He looked ridiculous. And they said the reason why they gave him such a small horse is because he didn't know how to ride a horse. And of course he was going to fall off. And if he falls off, he's not going to have to land that far. He's not going to get himself hurt. Well, we know that Lincoln knew how to ride a horse. Who said that? Most likely the Democrats, to make the president look ridiculous. Others said it was the biggest, blackest stallion they ever saw, probably with smoke coming out of its nostrils, as you can see on the right. That's a big horse. That's what the Republicans said. It probably was somewhere in between, as you can see. Henry Sweeney mounted on a beautiful bay charger. It's a normal-sized horse, essentially. Okay, but still, kind of interesting, this controversy. Here he is again on a horse, doffing his hat. What was his affect? Well, you can see some of these quotes. I'm not going to read them to you, but he's towering, he's bowing, he's recognizing individuals as he is riding through the town of Gettysburg to the dedication. Okay, look at the number of people who are there. 15,000 people. Do you really think that everybody could hear what was going on? No. There he is. There's Ward Lemon right there. And you can see there's the comfort tent. There's the speaker's platform. And look at that. You know, you see who that is? And that guy right there, a little bit closer right there. And then who's that guy right there? We actually have a photograph of the speaker's platform, probably at the very beginning before the activities have begun. There's Lincoln not wearing his top hat, looking very pensive. And we know that Governor Curtin was there, and there he is with his son. Kind of interesting. And there's even a closer view of Lincoln. All right, another question mark. And again, this changes from time to time. Where was the speaker's platform located? Well, we know that it was built, it was about 12 by 20 feet in size to accommodate at least 30 people. If you read newspaper accounts of when they dedicated that ugly monument in the middle of the where the graves are, the reporters said it was the same location as where the speaker's platform was. Frederick Tilburg, also a chief historian at Gettysburg years and years ago, confirmed that, where the monument sits today. Others Selleck and McMurray said no, it was further to the northwest, still in the cemetery, but not right there. And then you have Kathy George, who again was a chief historian. She's looking at photographs, and she says there's no way that the speaker's platform could have been within the National Cemetery. It had to be outside of the National Cemetery. It had to be probably where the Jenny Wade gravesite is located. And then most recently, just a couple of years ago, Christopher Oakley, who is a faculty member at a university in California, or excuse me, Florida. He used to work for Disney and used some of the techniques he learned at Disney. His feeling was that it actually straddles the fence with the Evergreen Cemetery. He used triangulation approaches, as you can see. And that is what he's thinking right there. Can you all see that? That part of the platform, especially the comfort tent and the back of the platform, was in the Evergreen Cemetery. The front, where Lincoln is, where the speaker is, with the little table, is right up at the front, and that's in the National Cemetery. There it is. This right here, this is Christopher Oakley. And if you go to the National Cemetery, there's some rhododendron trees. Apparently, that's where he thinks the the speaker's platform would be, where Lincoln was actually speaking. But there are many people, including the chief historian at the Adams County Historical Society, who does not buy it. So I don't know if we're ever going to know, really. I want to ask you a question. What would you be doing while Lincoln is speaking? This guy, Edward Everett, is going to speak for 2 hours. You got music, you got prayers, you've got such a long program. And then Lincoln's going to get up. And before photographers can set up, he's done. And many people never knew that he was speaking. You know, if it's me, if I hear this guy droning on for 2 hours, I'm probably taking a little nap. I'm talking to my friends, maybe eating something. I don't know if I'd be sitting there or standing there listening intently for 2 straight hours plus everything else. What was his affect as he was on stage? Well, you can read some of the quotes. Face was very sad, very melancholy, deep sincerity. One of the reasons why he wanted to come was because this meant something to him. He understood that he was sending men off to war, and they were giving up their lives, their limbs, etc., their health for him, for the notion that this is a nation that cannot be divided. And he understood that, and he wore that. Did Lincoln read his remarks? Another question mark. We don't know, because there is so much contradictory information. Everyone who was there or claimed to be there had a different viewpoint. We know when he got up, he unfolded himself, as has been described, his legs were probably crossed. Out of one pocket will come his spectacles, his glasses. Out of another pocket will come his speech. There's the speech. I don't think I see any spectacles, though. But I'm going to show you a range of artist representations. And what you'll see is here he's motioning, which, by the way, many people who were there insisted he never motioned at all. Some say that he held on to that piece of paper with 2 hands and rocked back and forth. Some say he read the whole darn thing. Others say he memorized it. Some say he looked up and down. We don't know, because there's so much contradictory evidence. Okay. On the left, there's no speech. On the right, a speech but no spectacles. On the right, motioning, which he probably did not do. He's very depressed, very solemn. Look at that one. That is very dramatic. Probably not. Okay. So did the crowd actually hear his remarks? Remember, he had a high-pitched voice, so it's going to travel a little further. But when you have 15,000 people, they're going to be stretched way back. Well, the reporter from the New York Times says it was so quiet that people could hear every word. I don't know. I believe the Indianapolis Daily Journal reporter was more accurate. I couldn't hear a single word he said. But it's no matter, it'll be published, which it is going to be published. I think that many individuals never heard anything. They could see him, but they couldn't hear him. Now, there are reporters up on stage, and the reporters are going to write down everything that he says in his Gettysburg Address. And you can compare what is in the John Nicolay copy in the Library of Congress that he used for his speech and these newspaper articles. And you see that he added 2 words, under God. Apparently, Lincoln was not going to bring the big guy into this, but I think he was so moved by the occasion that he ad-libbed under God. Did the audience applaud is another question. Now, it's a funeral. Do you applaud at a funeral? Obviously not. And some insisted, like John Hay, his aide, insisted there was no applause. But here is another, this is a copy of a newspaper article. And if you look, you can see at various places applause, 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 and at the end, long continued applause. I think these newspaper reporters who were right there taking down every word are to be believed. I think people did applaud as opposed to just sitting there quietly. How were the remarks received? Now, I don't know if I can do this. Well, I'm not going to touch it. I want you to look at this one. This is from the Baltimore Sun, okay? It's from November 20th, the following day. Look at the headline over here. Do you see the line? National Cemetery, Consecration, Military and Civic Procession, and the Honorable Edward Everett's address. Do you see anything about the president? No. This is a Democratic newspaper. They're not going to say anything about the president. Look over on the left. Don't look over on the right yet. Look over to the left. This is another Democratic newspaper. Yeah, you see, they do include speeches by the president. They don't say who the president is, and the Secretary of State, and others. And who is bolded and highlighted? Edward Everett. But my favorite of all is the one on the right. And this is from the Harrisburg Patriot News. It says, "We pass over the silly remarks of the president. For the credit of the nation, we're willing that the veil of oblivion shall be dropped over them, and they shall be no more repeated or thought of." That's pretty brutal. They don't even print his Gettysburg Address. They say it's horrible, it's silly. And the interesting thing is, during the sesquicentennial, they will print finally a retraction. You know, that speech of the president wasn't so bad after all, but it took him 150 years to do it. Here's another one. And you can see progress of the president. Look down here, President enthusiastic received everywhere. Guess what? The Daily Morning Chronicle from Washington, D.C. is a Republican newspaper. So it depends on whether you're reading a Republican or a Democratic newspaper. Okay, well, after the ceremony, it's over. It's about 2 o'clock. About what it is right now, actually. And so what do you want to do after? Well, obviously, you're going to go back to the Wills house. You want to grab some lunch. Now, if it's me, I think I might be saying, my son is feeling better, but I better get back to Washington because I know Mary is not very happy. I better get moving. He doesn't do that. Instead, he is going to be involved in meeting and greeting a number of people. In fact, he's going to stand outside the front door of the Wills house. There's a long line of people stretched down York Street, making their way to the front of the Wills house. They can go up the steps. They can shake hands with the president. He'll kiss your baby. And rather than walk down the steps, you go through the Wills house the Wills law office in his first floor, and you come out the side door on the square. And who's standing right there? The governor of Pennsylvania. You can shake his hands as well. 2 for 1. Now, one of the interesting things is, I'm going to go back up. One of the interesting questions, I don't know if I have it here, maybe, is how many people he infected with smallpox. Because one of the things that happens is he catches smallpox from his son. And he is beginning to feel the symptoms, the early symptoms of smallpox. And that is extreme headache and extreme fatigue. And he probably is saying, well, I didn't sleep well last night. That's probably all it is. But when he gets back to Gettysburg, he will be bedridden for 3 weeks, almost dies. And most people don't realize this because they wanted to keep it secret. It would be very destabilizing if they knew that the president was that ill. Okay, I'm going home, right? No, he's not going home yet. He decides to visit the Presbyterian church about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Why would he do that? Now, Lincoln is not Presbyterian. He's not Episcopalian. He really is not strong in any religion. He considers himself to be a Christian, but doesn't identify with a particular religion. Why would he? But he's very spiritual. He does believe in God. There's no question about that. Well, it's not a religious service. The state of Ohio has come to the dedication in large numbers. The governor of Ohio, Governor Todd, governor-elect, lieutenant governor, congressman, lots of people from Ohio have come to the dedication ceremony, and the governor will rent the sanctuary of the Presbyterian Church on Baltimore Street. And he says to the president, why don't you join us at our political rally? And the president has a dilemma. On one hand, he wants to go home. He wants to see Tad. He wants to interact with Mary. Probably not going to be very positive. Or do I go to the church? And he says, who helped me get elected in 1860? He says, Ohio. And who do I need next year during my re-election campaign? Ohio. And where am I going? I'm going to the church. And he says, I'm not going alone. I'm going to go with this guy on the right. You know who he is? That's John Burns. He's a national hero. He's the only civilian, the only citizen of Gettysburg who went out with his ancient flintlock musket and fought the Confederates. He's going to shoot several of them, and he's going to be wounded 3 times. And Lincoln says, I want to rub shoulders with this man. And so he'll come to the Wills house, and arm in arm, they will make their way to the Presbyterian Church to participate in the rally. One of them falls asleep, and everybody says it must be John Burns, because John Burns is 69 years old. And if you're old like me, I'm 74, you know that it's very easy to fall asleep. Actually, I think it was Lincoln. Remember, Lincoln hadn't slept well the night before, that night. He's coming down with smallpox, but there's going to be a tap on Lincoln's shoulder at about 6:30 in the evening, and he is going to make his way back to the Wills house to thank Mr. and Mrs. Wills for their hospitality, and then he's going to get back on the train and head back to Washington. that is the new Presbyterian church on the left. It's not the original one that was knocked down in the last century, the 1900s. And then, but they did save his pew, and they've tried to put it about where it would have been. Okay, how did Lincoln view his speech? This could have been one of the greatest speeches. It was one of the greatest speeches ever uttered by a president or others. How many times do we see a monument to a speech? We don't. He will tell Ward Lemon that speech fell on the audience like a wet blanket. This is Lincoln saying this. I'm distressed about it, he said. I ought to have prepared it with more care. Holy cow. How could the man who wrote this immortal address believe that it was a horrible, horrible failure? The only thing I can think of is imagine, and we've all done this, we've all had to get up and give little talks, and imagine a lot of people in the audience are ignoring them. Maybe they're sleeping, maybe they're not texting, but maybe they're talking to their friends. They are not paying attention, and I think he was taking the affect from these people. It wasn't that they weren't interested, it just was that they didn't know he was talking, because that program had been stretched on so long, and they couldn't hear that it was more along the lines of that. Wayne McVeigh, who's another one of his friends, will tell Lincoln, you've made an immortal address, and you can see what Lincoln says. Don't say that. Don't be extravagant. And he's going to go to his deathbed believing that the Gettysburg Address was a failure, which is really interesting, I think. Okay, we talked a little bit about this. Okay, for 3 weeks. Now, I didn't tell you about William Johnson. Most people have never heard of William Johnson. I never heard of William Johnson until I started my research. William Johnson will come to Gettysburg with Lincoln. William Johnson is one of Lincoln's best friends. William Johnson is black. He's a black man. And he's a barber. And when Lincoln was riding the circuit, before he became president, Lincoln loved to go to William's barbershop because they had a similar personality. They would tell jokes, they would kid around, they would tell stories. And when Lincoln became president, he will invite William Johnson to come to the executive mansion or the White House to become an aide or a servant. I don't know how you want to put it. And William Johnson says, yeah, I'd like to do that. And he does. And unfortunately, he doesn't get along well with the other staff, not because he's black, but because he's much darker skinned than the other aides. And Lincoln feels that he has to remove him and place him in the Department of the Treasury for his own good. But when Lincoln comes to Gettysburg, he says to William, why don't you come with me? And who is in the room with Lincoln? It's William Johnson. Who's probably sleeping in the same bedroom with Lincoln? William Johnson. Who's going to take care of Lincoln when he comes back and is going to be bedridden for over 3 weeks? William Johnson. And what is the reward that William Johnson gets for taking such good care of Abraham Lincoln? There it is. William Johnson will receive a full-blown case of smallpox from Lincoln. And Lincoln has to know that he gave his best friend smallpox and essentially killed him. He's going to make sure that he is buried in the New Arlington National Cemetery in 1864. Well, the aftermath, we know that war is going to continue for 2 more years. We know that Lincoln is going to be bedridden for at least 3 weeks. Edward Everett will die in 1865 early, I believe, of pneumonia that he catches while he's outside. And William Johnson will die as well. So that gives you hopefully a flavor of Lincoln's visit to Gettysburg. I wish I could tell you exactly what happened, blow by blow. But what's kind of interesting about history is there's so much that we don't know. And hopefully as new diaries and letters materialize, we'll be able to fill in some of the blanks.
So thank you very much for coming and spending your Sunday with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. And again, a plug, if anybody's ever interested in a town tour, I'd strongly recommend it. We have 15 guides to walk around the town, learn about the history. The Gettysburg is more than the battlefield itself. The battlefield is also within the town, so I want to strongly recommend that as well. Thank you.